Support comes from Soaring Heart Natural Beds, where concern for the health and safety of sleep now extends to everything from curbside pickup and delivery to secure in-store appointments. Showrooms in Seattle, Bellevue, and now in Edmonds, or online at soaringheart.com.
Hey, it's Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. There was public outcry last month after the shootings in Atlanta and Boulder. But steady gun violence in our own city, often against young black men, is a crisis that we struggle to connect with. Today, we'll hear a challenge to think differently about it. But first, let's get you caught up. Jeff Bezos is backing President Biden's infrastructure plans, including a corporate tax rate hike. The Amazon founder said yesterday it's the right time for Democrats and Republicans to work together to make it happen, and specifically signaled his support for the tax increase. Just last week, Biden said it was, quote, just plain wrong that the company pays less in federal income tax than middle-class families. The president wants to up the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%, but he's getting opposition. Pierce County is moving ahead with an outside investigation of its sheriff. Ed Troyer is facing calls to resign after calling 911 on a newspaper carrier in late January and making a claim that his life was in danger. That triggered a 40-officer response. The county council approved a $50,000 contract it plans to offer to former U.S. Attorney Brian Moran. Moran is now in private practice and hasn't agreed to the deal yet. And be careful if you're feeding the birds. That salmonella outbreak that's been circulating among songbirds like pine siskins, now it's making people sick, too. State health officials say there have been 6 cases here in Washington. The CDC recommends cleaning and disinfecting your bird feeder or bird bath weekly or when they're looking dirty. America has a gun violence problem. It's an epidemic that hits every community on some level. But how we view gun violence changes a lot, depending on where it happens and who it happens to. Marcus Greene calls this asymmetrical compassion. He's a journalist and founder and publisher of the South Seattle Emerald. He wrote about the indifference black victims of gun violence face in Seattle, especially those south of downtown. I met up with Marcus at Skyway Park in the South End to talk about it. It's so good to see you in person after talking this whole year, off and on.
Yes.
To finally see you in person.
And you are a real person, Trisha. I thought it was like maybe a computer AI that was talking to me when I would, come on to Casual Fridays. But no, it is you. So thank you.
It would be easier if I was an AI sometimes. But anyway. I want to talk about what you mean when you say asymmetrical compassion. Can you just explain this a little bit for listeners?
Yeah, I think, the Reader's Digest version of it is that when we see African Americans and typically African American males die at the hands of gun violence, right, it's treated almost as if it's routine or expected. I want to give the example of a nurse who I talked to in Philadelphia for my column that ran in the Seattle Times and South Seattle Emerald. So her name is Dr. Chidi, is what they call her. Down in West Philadelphia, she acts as a trauma nurse. Last year, Philadelphia had more gun deaths, 500 people, and shootings, 2,500 shootings, than there are days in the year, obviously. And so she said that every single day while she was working, she would see usually a young black man who was a victim of gun violence, and then she would try to treat him, and then they would die, and it became it came to the point where it was almost as if she became apathetic to it. She was like, this is just another thing, and to the point that when a white victim of gun violence was treated by her, she was like, oh my God, what happened, right? I mean, it automatically, right, these emotions that were sort of deadened by the sight of black folks, they became alive again. And she said she had to stop herself and ask herself, why is that? What has happened that I am deadened to another human being's tragedy and death? And, that really just resonated with me as somebody who has unfortunately had friends who have been victims of gun violence and how they've been treated even, by the media initially. I had a friend, Latrell Williams, happened to be wrong place, wrong time, ended up being a victim of gun violence about 4 years ago. All the news coverage that I saw, and his mother Linda saw, he was treated like a statistic and a quick mention, 2 sentences in, a 400-word story. And for us, and I speak for the people who have been affected by gun violence, at the end of the day, we all have to have some level of compassion and humanity for each other. And the fact that we don't seem to have that in this society is very telling about our society.
Well, and what you said about media coverage and the dialogue around shootings is so important, because in so many ways, everything we consume is handed to us, right, by some voice. And if the media and journalists don't treat black deaths the same way they treat white deaths, then that dialogue is missing a critical component of humanity.
Right, and inside a vacuum of understanding, that's usually filled with various narratives, and some of those narratives can be very harmful. I can't tell you how many people, once I retweeted out the story, how many tweets I got back from people saying, oh, well, if fathers were in the equation, and the thing is, one, you're assuming that these people don't have family members and fathers and so forth, and I wonder why you're assuming that. Or you're just, unfortunately, perpetuating a very harmful myth, and you'd rather this issue not be your issue, essentially, right? You'd rather this issue not be society's issue, so then you don't have to address it.
Well, and that's privilege, right? The privilege to look away. Marcus, I hear it a lot about absent fathers, parents in prison, and how difficult it is for young people in the city to manage their lives, to get a fresh start, to get a good footing. But there is another side to that you talk about in your column, and it's really about not investing in those areas of young people's lives.
Right. There's a reason why gun violence is disproportionately concentrated in poor black and brown neighborhoods, right? These are neighborhoods that have historically had to wither things like housing discrimination, redlining, meaning that black and brown people only had access to the poorest areas of the city. That also equates to, well, guess what? Our school system is also funded by property taxes, local property taxes. So if you live in a poor area, that means your school isn't necessarily going to be fully resourced, and we know that is the case. And so you have these situations where you've had artificial economic depression, and you've had a lack of investment in infrastructure. We're sitting here in Skyway right now. People have called it, over the last decades, the medical health services desert. There's not really a medical facility anywhere near it until the grocery outlet moved in, which is a discount grocer. It was a food desert for quite some time. If you want to, we don't have a PCC here. You can't get, if you're on the Tom Brady TB12 diet, good luck, right? Are just trying to eat healthy, right? All jokes aside, it's very difficult to do. And so there's a reason, right, why poor black and brown people have higher medical risk and as well, right? It just all comes back, right, to a lack of investment in these areas.
King County prosecutor says in 2020, 140 people were shot in King County. And on the other side of that is some number close to 140 people who picked up a weapon and fired it.
Right. And, you're telling me those numbers now, Trish, and it just makes me kind of think, too, about how not only do we many times gloss over and minimize and reduce the humanity of the victims of, gun violence, but then also, right, the people who are the shooters. And look, I want to be careful in saying that I am not at all saying that I condone anything that these people have done or are doing or behavior, but I look at it like this. Look at what happened with the Atlanta shooter and how, there were news reports following the shooting 2 days later explaining his, Christian upbringing, his background, some of the things that he did as a child, some of the, and so on and so forth. And that is an exercise in trying to seek understanding in why this happened, right? Now, flip that over to when it's quote unquote I'm not even going to say the phrase, but when a black person kills another black person, right? There's no level of understanding that's laid at the feet of the shooter, right? There's no understanding. Well, why would this person do this? What are the conditions that led somebody to take another human being's life without recourse? how is our society producing these people? And what can we do to do about it? That question, again, is rarely ever asked.
There's always going to be people who are going to say that we need to have justice in these situations, because what we're really talking about is keeping young people out of jail and healing and helping them get to a place that's better and healthier for them.
Yeah, I'll say, that conversation on justice versus mercy has been going on since time immemorial. I was recently honestly reading some of the old philosopher Isaiah Berlin, and when he talked about having a pluralistic society, right? That the mixture of one and the other. And so for us, it's, I think, unfortunately, what we've been able to see in terms of us, when I say us, the United States having 5% of the world's population and over a quarter of the world's prisoners, those prisoners being disproportionately folks of color. I think that we can see that the punitive measures have certainly swung off in an extreme direction. And it should also be mentioned too that the fastest growing prison population is Black women. And so I think what we need to do is that we also have to have a justice system that is based on some level of mercy as well, right? It's, I think we can find I don't want to say happy medium, but some level of optimum, an optimum justice system, if you will, that truly is a justice system that allows for transformation, that allows for rehabilitation, that allows for, some level of, restoration and reciprocity between, a victim and victimizer that, we can, hopefully move forward with.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens here in King County and Seattle moving forward, because this is a city and county who likes to talk about reform and progressiveness. So we'll see where it goes, Marcus.
It's going to take courage from, yes, elected officials, but I think also from the everyday people as well, trying to demand and advance justice and, some level, right, of accountability for folks, but then also some level of mercy for other people. And I think, that's a job that we're all, all need to play our part in. We are, as they say in at the end of Romeo and Juliet, right? These two families have been fighting, for decades and decades, and it ends up in the death of both of their loved ones. He says all are punished, and I think the thing is that we are all punished when we have a system that continues to go the way that it goes and continues to punish people disproportionately, and then also when we see that disproportionate victims of gun violence are Black and brown folks. We are all punished, and which means it's on all of us to heal this system, to try to heal this system.
Marcus Greene, thanks for meeting me out here in the Skyway neighborhood in this lovely park.
Thank you so much for venturing out here and meeting me in person. This was a pleasure as always.
Seattle Now is produced by Clare McGrane, Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.